Hey, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. Glad you're here. So if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read the Book of Mormon one chapter at a time, and I provide a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, hopefully further understanding, and I may or may not make a few jokes here and there. But either way, it's a good time. So I would suggest that you actually go back to the first episode, the intro, or just the first chapter of the Book of Mormon, just so that you can get your bearings kind of with what's going on in the Book of Mormon, where we're at right now. But in terms of last week, we read 1 Nephi chapter 7, and it is where Lehi asks Nephi, Laman, Lemuel, and Sam to go back to Jerusalem again to go collect some wives. So yeah, they just go grab the family of Ishmael, take their family along with them. So now there's two families in the wilderness, the family of Lehi and the family of Ishmael. So yeah, they did that. They came back. On the way back, Laman and Lemuel got really upset and were like, why can't we just go back to Jerusalem? Like, we were just there. We're not dead, obviously. Can't we just go back? And Nephi was like, no, we have to move forward in faith, obviously, and all that. And Laman and Lemuel get angry enough that they literally try to kill him. They tried to leave him to die, to be eaten by wild animals in the wilderness. So, yeah. Great show of brotherly love there. However, Nephi prayed for strength from God, got that strength from God, and was able to get out of the ropes that he was bound in, and then kind of chastised his brothers for being unfaithful. And he was like, guys, come on. You're better than this. And then Laman and Lemuel were sufficiently chastised because they were like, oh man, he got out of the ropes we've tied him in. And then Laman and Lemuel asked for Nephi's forgiveness, and he gave it to them. And then they make it back to their father's camp safe and sound, family of Ishmael in tow. So yeah, chapter 7 was just a jaunt on back to Jerusalem for Lehi's boys, and there was just a little bit of attempted murder on the way back. It's fine. Without any further ado, I think we move on to 1 Nephi chapter 8. And it came to pass that we had gathered together all manner of seeds of every kind, both of grain of every kind, and also of the seeds of fruit of every kind. And it came to pass that while my father tarried in the wilderness, he spake unto us, saying, Behold, I have dreamed a dream, or in other words, I have seen a vision. And behold, because of the thing which I have seen, I have reason to rejoice in the Lord because of Nephi and also of Sam, for I have reason to suppose that they and also many of their seed will be saved. But behold, Laman and Lemuel, I fear exceedingly because of you, for behold, methought I saw in my dream a dark and dreary wilderness. So this is the beginning of the Tree of Life vision. This is a huge vision in the Book of Mormon, and it's really important. It's just saturated with imagery of Jesus and of our journey through life and everything. I'm so excited to read this. And as you can see in verse 3, he says, I'm worried about Laman and Lemuel, and I'm happy about Nephi and Sam, and you will see why. And it came to pass that I saw a man, and he was dressed in a white robe, and he came and stood before me. And it came to pass that he spake unto me, and bade me follow him. And it came to pass that as I followed behind him, I beheld myself that I was in a dark and dreary waste. And after I had traveled for the space of many hours in darkness, I began to pray unto the Lord that he would have mercy on me, according to the multitude of his tender mercies. And it came to pass that after I had prayed unto the Lord, I beheld a large and spacious field. And it came to pass that I beheld a tree, whose fruit was desirable to make one happy. And it came to pass that I did go forth and partake of the fruit thereof, and I beheld that it was most sweet, above all that I had ever before tasted. Yea, and I beheld that the fruit thereof was white, to exceed all the whiteness that I had ever seen. And as I partook of the fruit thereof, it filled my soul with exceedingly great joy, wherefore I began to be desirous that my family should partake of it also, for I knew that it was desirable above all other fruit. So, Lehi is in this dark and dreary wilderness. He prays to God, and then he sees himself in this huge, vast field, and he sees a tree with beautiful white fruit on it, and he knows that that fruit is all that you could ever want. And so he eats it, and he's like, wow, this is amazing. And then his first thought is, I want my family to have this also. His first thought is, well, now that I have it, I have to share it. I have to share it with my family. I want them to be saved as well. And I really like how you can see in this that Lehi focuses on his family. Even earlier in verse 3 and 4, when he was talking about how his kids, like how he was worried about Laman and Lemuel and so forth, that's because he focused on his family, and he cares about them, and he wants them to be saved like he will be. And I think that's really interesting. And actually later, in the next few chapters, Nephi prays and asks to see this vision for himself, and so he can understand what his father was telling him. And we get a different perspective on a similar vision, and we get all the meaning behind it. And so I'm actually not going to try and explain all the imagery in this episode very much, because in the next few chapters, Nephi is going to receive that from God. And so I can't really explain it as well as God can, so that's for later. But I just liked how you can just see how worried Lehi is about his family, and specifically about his kids. I really like that. And as I cast my eyes round about, that perhaps I might discover my family also, I beheld a river of water, and it ran along, and it was near the tree of which I was partaking the fruit. And I looked to behold from whence it came, and I saw the head thereof a little way off. And at the head thereof I beheld your mother, Sariah, and Sam, and Nephi, and they stood as if they knew not whither they should go. And it came to pass that I beckoned unto them, and I also did say unto them with a loud voice, that they should come unto me, and partake of the fruit, which was desirable above all other fruit. And it came to pass that they did come unto me, and partake of the fruit also. And it came to pass that I was desirous that Laman and Lemuel should come and partake of the fruit also. Wherefore I cast mine eyes toward the head of the river, that perhaps I might see them. And it came to pass that I saw them, but they would not come unto me, and partake of the fruit. And that right there is actually the reason why Lehi is so worried about his kids, specifically Laman and Lemuel, not really Nephi and Sam. Obviously, Nephi, Sam, and his wife, Sariah, came readily. He called to them, and they're like, oh, heck yeah, let's get that. Let's do it. But then he calls to his sons, Laman and Lemuel, and they don't come. And I'm sure if you were Lehi in this case, you'd be like, but why? There's nothing in this field. And you're not going to come to the tree full of beautiful, white, delicious fruit? Really? It must be so crazy from Lehi's perspective at the moment, just to see his kids not come. Because he knows how good it is. He has tasted of the fruit. He knows just how amazing it is. And we'll understand exactly what this fruit symbolizes again later on. But it must be so crazy to have this light and knowledge in his life. And his kids don't want it. He's like, guys, this is amazing. How can you not want this amazing knowledge and peace in your life? And I beheld a rod of iron, and it extended along the bank of the river and led to the tree by which I stood. And I also beheld a straight and narrow path, which came along the rod of iron, even to the tree by which I stood. And it also led by the head of the fountain, unto a large and spacious field, as if it had been a world. Sorry for pausing so soon, right after I already commented, but in the beginning of this verse that I just read, verse 20, it says, and he also beheld a straight and narrow path. And straight is not S-T-R-A-I-G-H-T, which means like a straight line. Straight as in S-T-R-A-I-T, which means difficult. And I think that's really important because in a lot of art that we see of this tree of life vision, it's just a very straight, as in straight line, narrow path, standing by a rod of iron, kind of like a handrail. When in reality, it was straight as in difficult. So I actually saw this art somewhere that was representing the tree of life, and it was on this big rocky crag, and it was this beautiful tree of this amazing fruit, but the path to get to that tree is a big rocky mountain face, and I really like that imagery, because getting to the tree of life is not easy, but it's rewarding. I think that sometimes when we're talking about this vision, since it's described as a big field that Lehi's standing in, we might not understand that the path to get to the tree is still difficult. Because when you imagine a field, you imagine just flat grass. You don't imagine any obstacles, And yet, it's called the straight and narrow path. It was a difficult path to follow. And so I like to imagine it as if it were, in that piece of art that I mentioned, as if it were this steep, narrow path full of obstacles. Because that's what life is like. Life is hard. Life is full of obstacles. And yet, getting to that tree of life, getting to partake of that fruit, is the ultimate reward. I just love the tree of life. And we'll obviously learn more as we keep reading, but I just love this vision because it represents life in a very relatable way. I can still relate to how this vision describes life. And it was written thousands of years ago. That's so cool. It really, again, connects us to the people that wrote this record because they had similar lives to us in many ways. They also had hard lives. Following God was difficult, And I just appreciate that. So, anyways, that's enough from me. And I saw numberless concourses of people, many of whom were pressing forward, that they might obtain the path which led unto the tree by which I stood. And it came to pass that they did come forth and commence in the path which led to the tree. And it came to pass that there arose a mist of darkness, yea, even an exceedingly great mist of darkness, insomuch that those who had commenced in the path did lose their way, that they wandered off and were lost. And it came to pass that I beheld others pressing forward, and they came forth and caught hold of the end of the rod of iron, and they did press forward through the mist of darkness, clinging to the rod of iron, even until they did come forth and partake of the fruit of the tree. And after they had partaken of the fruit of the tree, they did cast their eyes about as if they were ashamed. And I also cast my eyes round about, and I beheld on the other side of the river of water a great and spacious building, and it stood as it were in the air, high above the earth. And it was filled with people, both old and young, both male and female, and their manner of dress was exceedingly fine, and they were in the attitude of mocking and pointing their fingers towards those who had come at and were partaking of the fruit. So this is the great and spacious building, which I'm sure it's not too difficult to understand that this kind of represents the world and like the judgment and harassment that followers of God might get from the world. And also just like the temptations of Satan and everything. So everything kind of negative is represented in this great and spacious building full of people laughing, pointing, all that. And something that I didn't really notice for a while until someone pointed it out is in verse 26 when it's described. It says, "And it stood as it were in the air, high above the earth." And I think that represents kind of two things. I think it represents not only that the people in the building feel high and mighty, they feel like holier than thou in a way, but also the fact that the building doesn't have a foundation. It's floating. It has no foundation because it's not founded on the rock of Jesus Christ. And I just think it's really interesting imagery where, like, this is a great and spacious building full of this large amount of people who are dressed really finely, and yet the huge, intimidating building that they're in, it could likely get knocked over with a breeze. And I just think it's really interesting imagery. And again, I didn't notice it for a long time until someone pointed it out. So yeah, I think the imagery of the great and spacious building is, really applicable, obviously, to everyday life because, as followers of God, we might feel judged, we might feel harassed, we might just feel tempted by Satan. Like, that's part of life. And again, that's another reason that I love this vision, is because it represents life. And this great and spacious building is a big part of it. Oh my goodness, I am getting so excited. And after they had tasted of the fruit, they were ashamed because of those that were scoffing at them, and they fell away into forbidden paths and were lost. And now I, Nephi, do not speak all the words of my father. But to be short in writing, behold, he saw other multitudes pressing forward, and they came and caught hold of the end of the rod of iron, and they did press their way forward, continually holding fast to the rod of iron, until they came forth and fell down and partook of the fruit of the tree. And he also saw other multitudes feeling their way towards that great and spacious building. And it came to pass that many were drowned in the depths of the fountain, and many were lost from his view, wandering in strange lands. And great was the multitude that did enter into that strange building. And after they did enter into that building, they did point the finger of scorn at me and those that were partaking of the fruit also. But we heeded them not. These are the words of my father, for as many as heeded them had fallen away. And Laman and Lemuel partook not of the fruit, said my father. And it came to pass that after my father had spoken all the words of his dream or vision, which were many, he said unto us, because of these things which he saw in a vision, he exceedingly feared for Laman and Lemuel. Yea, he feared lest they should be cast off from the presence of the Lord. And he did exhort them then with all the feeling of a tender parent, that they would hearken unto his words, that perhaps the Lord would be merciful to them, and not cast them off. Yea, my father did preach unto them. And after he had preached unto them, and also prophesied unto them of many things, he bade them to keep the commandments of the Lord, and he did cease speaking unto them. Oh my goodness, what a chapter. Right? Right? That's such a cool vision. And obviously, we didn't really go into detail as to what exactly represents what, but I feel like there are some things that are kind of obvious. That tree that was full of fruit that was white above that of the noonday sun and all these things. That obviously represents something to do with God's love, God's gospel, coming into like kind of the embrace of Jesus, all that. And the great and spacious building is the temptation of the world. It's the natural man. It's Satan. It's all those things that fight against us becoming closer with God. Like I said so many times in this episode, I just love this vision because it represents life, and I can relate to how some of these people feel. I can relate to the people that come to the tree after clinging to the rod of iron, and then they get to the tree and they feel judged and they feel mocked and scorned by the people in the great building, and then they leave. Obviously, since I'm making this podcast, I haven't left, but, I can kind of relate to how they feel. I can understand why they did what they did in that vision. And, oh my goodness, so much of this can be applied to everyday life. And so much of this can teach us how to live our life and what life is like, where to go, who to follow. It's so cool. And then, like I said earlier, Nephi prays to God and gets this vision for himself. And so we're going to get a second version of the same vision with more detail. Oh, I'm so excited. This is going to be so cool. So my standout verse for this chapter, I think, is going to be verse 30, which, just to read it again, it says, "But to be short in writing, behold, he saw other multitudes pressing forward, and they came and caught hold of the end of the rod of iron, and they did press their way forward, continually holding fast to the rod of iron, until they came forth and fell down and partook of the fruit of the tree." And I think my favorite part about that verse is the very end, where once they get to the tree, they fall down, and then they partake of the fruit. And I think that falling down is kind of twofold. I think, one, they're tired. They're exhausted from the hard work that they had to do to get there. Like I said, it's a straight and narrow path. Not a straight line path, but a difficult and narrow path. And so I believe people who get to the tree are just tired from the difficulties of life. And also, I think that the people who get to the tree and fall down, I like to imagine that they just fall to their knees because they're just in awe of this amazing reward that they've been given. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I just love the concept of feeling the Spirit so strongly that you can do nothing except fall on your knees and praise God. That is something that I've only experienced, I think, once. It's so cool to just feel like I can do nothing but bow my head. Like, that's all I can do. And that's kind of what I imagine these people are feeling a little bit of. Both exhaustion and also just utter and complete awe of God and his power and his mercy and everything. And yeah, that's a good verse. So yeah, I think that's about it for today. That was, oh my goodness, like I said, such a good chapter. Thank you for letting me talk your ear off about the Tree of Life. So yeah, just a side note, if you do want to read along, which I highly recommend you do, you can either go to lds.org to find a web version of the Book of Mormon, or you can download the Book of Mormon app, which is just an app with the Book of Mormon on it, very self-explanatory. And then there's also the Gospel Library app, which has all published LDS resources on it, including the Book of Mormon. And all of these are free. All the links are in the episode notes. Feel free. There's also a link in the episode notes that says, "Let me know what you learned." And that is literally a link where you can let me know what you learned. It's a place where you can contact me with your insights, with your cool comments. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. This was obviously a great episode for me to record. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.